You've heard the name, right? Atlantis. It's probably the most famous lost city in history, a symbol of some forgotten paradise that just vanished. But what if the whole story, this incredible mystery, was never really about a place at all? Let's dive in and unravel this thing.
So, this is the big question, isn't it? The one that's launched 1,000 ships and filled 1,000,000 books. Was there actually an advanced civilization that disappeared in a single night? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the one and only time this story was ever recorded in the ancient world. This right here, this is the line that started it all. It was written by the famous Greek philosopher Plato. And that description of a cataclysm so complete, so sudden, has just hooked our imaginations for centuries. But the really fascinating part isn't just what he said, but why he said it.
Okay, so our whole investigation really starts with just one guy. You see, even though it's one of the most famous legends on the planet, the story of Atlantis doesn't come from a bunch of ancient myths or multiple historical accounts. It comes from just one. Seriously. A single source. Any other time Atlantis is mentioned in the ancient world, it's always just referencing this one guy. And that guy is, you guessed it, the philosopher Plato. She tells this story in two of his famous works, which are known as dialogues. Now, these weren't history books, not at all. They were philosophical conversations. So, to really get what Atlantis is all about, you have to first understand what Plato was trying to do. And that's because Plato wasn't trying to record history. He was trying to teach a lesson. He was actually using Atlantis as this incredibly powerful story to make a point about how societies work, or how they fall apart. And a literary tool for that is called an allegory. Plato was an absolute master at this, using these fictional tales to dig into really complex ideas. So you can think of Atlantis as a giant thought experiment, something designed to get his audience thinking about what makes a perfect state.
So here's how Plato brilliantly sets up his story. He creates this epic showdown between two superpowers. On one side, you have his version of ancient Athens. They're the good guys, right? Virtuous, lawful, modest. And on the other side, you've got Atlantis, a massive empire that's super powerful and technologically advanced, but has become totally arrogant and corrupt.
And this is the whole point of the story. Atlantis, in its greed, tries to take over the world, but gets beaten by the smaller, morally superior Athens. Then, to top it all off, the gods punish Atlantis for its corruption by sinking the whole island into the sea. The message was crystal clear. It doesn't matter how rich or powerful you are, if you lose your way morally, you're doomed.
Okay, so if Plato just made up Atlantis to teach a lesson, is that it? Case closed? Well, not quite. Because even fictional stories can pull inspiration from real life. And a lot of experts think the spectacular destruction of Atlantis has a real-world parallel that is just jaw-dropping.
Let's talk about the volcanic island of Thera. Today, you probably know it as the gorgeous Greek island of Santorini. But way back around 1600 BCE, it was home to a super advanced civilization, and then it was all obliterated by one of the most violent volcanic eruptions in all of human history. Now, as you can see, there's a massive time gap here. We're talking over 1,200 years between the eruption and Plato's story. That's a long time, for sure, but it is totally plausible that a sort of broken, fragmented memory of this unbelievable disaster was passed down for generations, eventually making its way to Plato. And when you start lining up the similarities, it's pretty wild. You've got a powerful island civilization, check. A sudden, total collapse, check. The eruption would have created enormous tsunamis, which sounds a lot like a city disappearing into the sea. And get this, a huge part of the island literally sank when the volcano's center collapsed. The parallels are just striking. And as geologists like Sarah Zhang point out, an event this big would have left a deep scar on the memory of the ancient world. It was the perfect real-life disaster for a philosopher who needed a dramatic ending for his story about divine punishment. So Plato tells his philosophical tale, maybe borrowing from the memory of a real volcano. And for the next 2,000 years, that's pretty much what it stayed, a cool story for scholars to talk about. So how in the world did it morph into the global pop culture phenomenon we have today? This is the moment. This book right here changed everything. In 1882, an American politician named Ignatius Donnelly published it. He basically took Plato's story throughout the whole allegory part and argued that it was all literal factual history. And from there, the myth just snowballed.
It starts as Plato's moral tale. Then Donnelly comes along and reframes it as this mother culture for places like ancient Egypt. After that, early mystics grab onto it and turn it into a spiritual homeland with psychic powers and crystal tech. And from there, it just explodes into pop culture. And boom, you've got the underwater kingdom we all know from movies and comics. So we know where the story came from, and we know how it got twisted and changed over time. But that still doesn't quite explain why we're so captivated by it. Why, after all this, are we still so fascinated with the idea of a city lost beneath the waves?
Well, maybe the answer is that Atlantis isn't just a place. It's an idea. It's about hope, and it's about loss. It represents this deep-seated dream we all have of a perfect past, a golden age that was tragically ripped away from us. And the search for Atlantis is really a search for that perfection, a hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find it again.
So let's just sum this all up. The entire story of Atlantis starts and ends with one person, Plato. He meant for it to be a powerful allegory about the dangers of corruption and pride. The epic destruction part was very likely inspired by the real-life eruption of Thera. And the Atlantis we think of today, the one with super technology, that's a much, much more modern invention.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. For centuries, we've been scanning the ocean floor looking for a physical place. But what if Plato is pointing us somewhere else entirely? What if the lost city we should all be searching for isn't a place at all, but an idea? An idea about how we can build a better, more just world right here, right now.